George Nakashima, considered one of the fathers of the American craft movement and a big influence on my work. This is an homage to the Nakashima woodworkers.
We actually decide right on site how we're going to cut them. It's amazing because you never know what's going to be inside there till you get there. Dad used to take me along to the lumber yard and he'd say, well, when you cut a tree, it's like cutting diamonds, and we'll cut it this way because the grain's more beautiful that way.
Having a good relationship with my sawyer, I was invited to come watch a monster burled silver maple log sawed, and watching this log open up was incredible. The ugliest logs definitely have the most impressive figure. The seasons passed while the slabs dried, and 2 years later, a client contacted me saying she had purchased one of those incredible slabs and was hoping to commission a table. Knowing I had seen the slab in log form, watching it get milled and uncovering the insane grain, I sent her some photos of famous Nakashima table designs as inspiration, hoping she would go for one. She did. The Nakashima Conoid table. This is a story about that. My buddy Jordan, who was also there during milling day, agreed to team up with me on this project because we both had a lot going on in our lives and thought we would divide and conquer. I would work on the base and Jordan would work on the top. When I went back out to Hackett's to pick up some walnut for the base, Jordan was also there flattening the slab on Glenn's flattening machine called the Woodwiz. So much nicer than a router sled. Back at my shop, I started laying out base components and trying to figure out where I would get all the parts, where the straightest grain was, where the knots were, and such. I roughly broke down the slabs into more manageable pieces with my circular saw. Then I could use my jointer and table saw to mill parts for laminations. Knowing I would be laminating pieces to get thick enough stock, I paid close attention to the sequence of my cuts so I could book match the laminations to get mirrored grain in the leg stock where it mattered. After jointing and planing, I could start the lamination process. I like to make efficient use of my clamps and space by laminating them all at once, paying close attention to which surfaces get glue and which don't. With the leg parts out of clamps, I thought for a while on how I would make the leg connection to what I would call the long foot of the base. I settled on somewhat of an angled bridle joint, but it would almost be a halved joint within the bridle. A halved bridle joint? Housed half joint? Housed bridle? What would you call this joint? Let me know in the description. After installing a dado stack and the table saw, I needed to make a 15-degree zero clearance miter fence that's screwed to my miter gauge. Anytime I'm dealing with angles, it can get a little confusing, and it's easy to cut the angle the opposite way that you meant to, so I'm always slow and methodic when it comes to cutting angled dados. Once I committed, I was happy to say I cut all the dados the right way. Now I needed to remove the waste to fit the adjoining piece. I laid out an 1 3/4 line from the bottom since my dado stack can only cut a 2-inch max depth, and headed to the bandsaw. I carefully set my miter gauge to the same 15 degrees and committed to the cut. Only only to realize I didn't stop to make sure I was cutting from the top and not the bottom, and I ended up cutting the bottom of the foot and the wrong side of my waistline. After cursing quite a bit and thinking and cursing some more, I conceded to the fact that it was unrepairable, and I called Jordan. I prepped some more stock, glued up another foot blank, laid it out all over again, cut the dados, and left myself a little note, then headed to the bandsaw. After removing the waist from the foot, I needed to make some corresponding dados in the legs. With my shop-made jig riding the fence, I added some 15-degree clamping blocks to the jig and cut the bottom of the foot, flipping the piece around to take the second cut to ensure the dado was centered. After checking the fit of the joint and finessing it a little with some chisel work, I could cut the dado for the smaller foot that runs perpendicular to the large foot. This was a simple halved joint and went smoothly. After I dry fit everything and disassembled, I sanded up through the grits while I had better access to the parts. I glued up the crossfoot assembly and turned my attention to the tabletop supports on the tops of the legs. Using some scrap, I test cut some dados until I had a near perfect dado. This is where the hybrid approach to woodworking really shines. I could do the bulk of the work with power tools, then come in and fine-tune the fit with a smoothing plane to get a perfectly snug fit. Oh yeah, baby. By this point, Jordan and I were basically working in tandem, which was a lot of fun, as evidenced by my I can't find the tool I'm looking for jig. Once I had the dado and the leg just right, I could scribe the leg onto the top supports and cut the corresponding dado for this halved joint. After we had the halved joint dialed in, we actually needed to then cut the tops of the legs at 15 degrees to make the tabletop parallel with the ground. Don't mess up. With the legs cut, we reinstalled the top supports and transferred the layout. I tilted the blade on my table saw to 15 degrees and ripped the bevel. At this point, I was really happy to see this base coming together. And here is what it looks like, all dry assembled. We were in the home stretch. Or so we thought. Next, we needed to fill the voids in the top to keep food items from getting stuck in crevices per the client's request, which brings me to this video's sponsor, Total Boat. We had some interesting pours in our future due to the placement of the voids. They weren't in the middle of the table, but on the outside edges. We wanted an epoxy that could handle deep pours, so we used Total Boat Thickset, which in the correct conditions can handle pours of up to 2 inches thick, or in this case, wide. When I'm filling voids, I like to add some powdered charcoal to the epoxy to give it a more subtle look. First, we tried the old standby of foil tape, and that failed. So we attempted to use Teflon tape on some plywood and dam around it with some silicone. The silicone apparently had gone bad and didn't set up like it was supposed to, as we later found out after we removed the boards to inspect what had happened. But on the third attempt, and a new tube of silicone, we had success. What do you think our chances are this time?
I think probably 95%.
Yeah, I think you were 100% last time, though. While we waited for that pour to dry, I started cutting out some butterflies, as made famous by Nakashima himself in the 1950s. After cutting out a rectangle blank, I used my quick shop-made butterfly layout jig to lay out an 8:1 ratio butterfly and cut it out on the small bandsaw. I cleaned it up at the disc sander before resawing it in half. If you're a longtime viewer of this channel, you've seen me lay out butterflies before, but if you're new, blue tape and CA glue are a great way to get a good visual reference when installing butterflies. I am a Starbond affiliate, and there is a link with a discount in the description if you are interested.
You're a silly goose. Oh man, you're getting me.
While I chiseled out the first butterfly, Jordan and my daughter played, which warmed my heart because as of posting this, Jordan's wife is nearing her due date and Jordan is about to become a dad for the first time, which I think he is going to be amazing at. I chamfered the bottom edges of the first butterfly and installed it. Since this was a joint effort, I took over kid duty and made Jordan install the second butterfly. You can discuss who wore it best in the comments, but I think they both turned out great. Once the butterflies were installed, I sanded them flush with my Mirka sanding system, and I love this setup. After another successful epoxy pour and a lot of sanding, Jordan and I hand sanded all of the epoxy to a higher grit than the rest of the table until we got the luster we were after. Then we flipped the table over and Jordan showed me how he likes to install steel C-channel to ensure the slab stays flat over time. A router with a 1/4-inch upcut spiral bit for the deeper cuts, then I came back after him with a 1.5-inch bit to cut the shallow groove for the flat of the C-channel. Then squared up the corners with a chisel. We drilled some holes to install some threaded inserts to accept some bolts to hold the C-channel through oversized holes in the steel. No project is truly complete without adding your brand. Hopefully someday, if this table is ever sold at auction, this will make the table worth more to the bidder with my name. My only regret is that Jordan doesn't have a brand of his own to place next to mine to make this a truly unique piece. Look at that figure. We decided to finish the piece with Rubio monocoat, as we both have been impressed with other furniture we've seen with it, and it did not disappoint. With everything dry and ready for assembly, I reinstalled the C-channel, then cut some biscuit slots to accept the tabletop fasteners, also referred to as Z-clips, to allow for seasonal wood movement. Though we definitely had some hiccups along the way, I think this piece turned out amazing. I hope that George would think it was a good effort at least. I've been told that imitation is the greatest form of flattery, and hope that Mira, his daughter, sees this video and isn't offended, but rather proud of her and her father's legacy and impact on young furniture makers and designers. The Nakashima Woodworker Studio is still going strong and is located in New Hope, Pennsylvania, if you're interested in a tour. I love that this piece is going to live in a family home, as I feel that this is where my head is these days. Let me know what you think in the comments, and as always, thanks for watching. It's bringing back memories to when I used to live here.
Oh. Does it look good?
Yeah.
The bottom just to
This is cool.
You can have one.
Yeah, we're trying. And on the bottom of this is a C-channel, so that it keeps it flat.
Hey, Daddy, show it to me.